We're back on Country Pocket. The new album is The Westerner. We're here with Andy Hedges, who is I guess the best thing to call you is somewhere between a folk singer and a folklorist. And um, you are a huge fan of cowboy poetry. Are you much of a writer of it yourself?
No, not much. I've written a few things over the years, but I've always been more drawn to the tradition of recitation, which is, cowboy poetry. It's in its earlier forms, was an oral tradition. These poems were passed down from one reciter to another, more so than from the page. And even today, I think that still holds true that cowboy poetry is at its best when it's being recited, and it's alive and well at these cowboy poetry gatherings, and it's one of the few places I know of where you go and there's hundreds and thousands of people excited to come together and listen to poetry. That's somewhat uncommon, and so I've always been drawn to these old traditional pieces.
Yeah, as someone who loves music, I really like to remind people, as someone who loves music and loves poetry, I like to remind people that they all listen to poetry on a fairly regular basis. They just aren't aware of it because it's being sung. Um, Now, what caught me about this album, or one of the many things, is you are a reciter of poetry, and I feel like you've put a lot of work and thought into the way you recite the poems. It feels very carefully measured the way you're reading it. So can you tell me a little bit about how you found your poetry reciting voice?
Well, I think it happened somewhat naturally. The first poem I ever memorized was actually one that was on that episode of Austin City Limits. Waddy Mitchell walked out onto that stage, and it was the first cowboy poem I had ever heard. And he recited a poem he had written about a dead cow rotting in a stream with this really graphic, grotesque description. And that's what really got me interested in poetry when I was 13. And I I listened to that so many times that I memorized it without trying, and I just started reciting it. And I'm sure, especially at that time, I was probably really imitating Waddy's style of recitation. Uh, but I think I pretty quickly and pretty naturally found my own voice for reciting poetry, and I was really blessed. I as a teenager, I started seeking out these cowboy poetry gatherings, and I came under the influence of a whole group of people who participated in this, and so I heard all kinds of reciters and all different styles and different voices, and that was very inspiring, and you could see the way people used their own personality and their own perspective and their own abilities to bring poetry to the stage, and so I was influenced by a lot of people. Waddy Mitchell, names that your listeners may not know, but they'd be worth seeking out. But people like Joel Nelson and Randy Riemann and old time reciters that are long gone, like Sonny Hancock and Ray Lashley. And so, just there was a lot of these guys. and gals who, were very authentic, who had been reciting poetry their entire lives, uh, probably mostly for their own enjoyment, were now reciting on stage, and they had these incredible repertoires of recitations, and it wasn't all cowboy. There'd be Robert Service poems and logging poems, and uh, all kinds of American literature that was appealing to them, and the whole thing was just very cool and exciting to me, and so through that process, and just getting to know these people and taking the stage myself, I think I developed my own style over the years.
I don't think the voice hurts. I couldn't drop into the register that you just seem to naturally have. Uh,
Well, as they say, I've got a great face for radio.
well, yeah, the way you talk, it sounds like you're probably one of the larger men on this planet, and you look just like a guy, but the voice is larger than life. So, seeing as though it's one of the first poems that you memorized, and you know, it I guess a decaying carcass is a very unique topic. I don't think I've gotten into on this show before. Um, why don't you share that one with us?
Sure, and there's a great little backstory to this that I often share on stage. But I, this was the first poem that I committed to memory, and it led to me reciting in public. I would recite it for a friend, and my parents found out I recited this poem, and so they would ask me to recite it for little family gatherings, and I started memorizing more poetry, and I kind of developed this reputation as this kid around town in our community who recited cowboy poems. But that first one was my kind of my favorite go to. And one evening, I was having dinner at this little barbecue cafe with my parents, and the owner of that establishment walked up to my table and he said, Andy, there's a group of senior citizens around the corner. They're right in the middle of their barbecue dinner, and I thought it'd be great if you would come recite a cowboy poem for them. And I said, well, I'd be glad to. And I guess at this point I was 15 years old, and at 15 years of age, it just didn't occur to me that my favorite poem might not be appropriate for the setting. And so I just launched right into it. Now, I know there's things worse that make cowpunchers curse, and I reckon it's happened to us all. Though it's been years since, you can bet when I think of it yet, it still makes my old innards crawl. You see, I was making a ride to bring in one hide that hadn't showed up in the gather. I was riding upstream, daydreaming this dream, when I thought, there's something the matter. Near some quaking asp trees, I'd caught in the breeze a stench that was raunchy and mean. I reckon as how it might be that old cow, so I rode to a bend in the stream. Sure enough, that cow'd lied in the creek there and died. Hard telling how long she'd been there. She was bloated and tight. It was a horrible sight. She was oozing and slipping her hair. Her eye sockets were alive with maggots that thrive on dead flesh, putrid yellow and green. And the hot sun burning down, turning pink things to brown, and spewing oily gunk in the stream. Well, I spurred upwind fast to get away from the blast of the heavy stench that cow made, and I felt bad seeing as how I'd lost the old cow, so I pulled up near a tree in the shade. And then I got sick to the core, remembering just moments before I'd done something made me feel worse. Not 30 yards down, I'd stepped to the ground and drank till my belly near burst. Well, for months after that, just the thought made me spit, and I'd live it over like a bad dream. And the moral, I think, is that if you must take a drink, never ever remount and ride upstream.
And that was senior citizens at a restaurant eating dinner.
Yeah, eating a brisket.
Oh, perfect.
My
Great.
parents were mortified, and they let me know on the drive home. But the owner, the name of that place was Beaver's Crossing, owned by Buddy Beavers, and I think he was a little nervous too about how deep into that description the poem would go, but uh, it ultimately worked out because he invited me to perform again, and I actually got a job working for him, and they had live music on the weekends and chuck wagon dinners, uh, and so I kind of got my start in show business at that little establishment. So
Were you asked to perform that particular poem again?
I don't know that I was at the restaurant.
Oh, absolutely beautiful, sir.
Thank you.
We will be back with Andy Hedges right after this.